What's up and welcome back to the MMA Mad Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Risner, and we are presented by The Disorderly, your home for the very best in sports and entertainment. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can catch all our great content over there. Okay, UFC 261, there's a lot to get into here. We're going to have a gambling bend on all the breakdowns this week because obviously it's becoming increasingly more legal around the country, and I'm happy to give the best advice I can. But before we get to the fights this weekend, I've got to mention the fact that this is the first event with a full capacity crowd since COVID shut everything down. Now, we can obviously debate whether this is the right move, right? The vaccination's rolling out, but a lot of people, including the majority of UFC's main demographic, have not yet received both of their shots. This is Florida, of course. Florida is going to Florida. Dana White has always been, pretty headstrong that, quote, we won't let the virus control our lives, that whole front. So it's not a surprise, of course, but with most of the vulnerable population having had time to access the vaccine if they want it, I'm thinking I'm more or less okay with people having the right to choose whether they want to attend this event. That said, I personally wouldn't go until I had both vaccines, but I don't have to make that decision, so who cares? And all of that aside, seeing a UFC event with a full crowd, full reactions to what's bound to be an amazing event, that's going to be fucking awesome. It just is. Shit, I'm even looking forward to the Ric Flair woos, the resounding boos as soon as the fight gets taken to the ground for like 10 seconds. Give me all that. I've even missed that part of a crowd over this past year and change. And honestly, what a great card to kick it all off with. We've got 3 title fights, all 3 of them exciting in their own way. First, we've got Jessica Andrade fighting at flyweight for just the second time for her career. Of course, she has fought at bantamweight before, back when that was your only option to fight in the UFC, so this isn't really that dramatic of a change, but she's fighting one of the most dominant fighters that we have in this sport in Valentina Shevchenko, who hasn't lost since Amanda Nunes beat her back in 2017. She's won 6 in a row, 5 of them title fights against the former strawweight champion Joanna Jędrzejczyk, then Jessica I, then Liz Carmouche, who defeated her way back in 2010, prior to women even being in the UFC, and then Katlyn Chookagian and Jennifer Maia. Jessica, on the other hand, is only 1-0 at 125 pounds, but that win was the first-round knockout of Katlyn Chookagian, good for her performance of the night bonus back in October. For reference, it took Valentina 3 rounds to take out Katlyn, although we all know MMA math is bullshit. My point is this could be more competitive than people think. Valentina is extremely technical with her striking, but Jessica is explosive. She has the grappling. She has the ability to close the distance, even against a decorated kickboxer like Valentina, at least enough to steal a round or 2 if necessary. And she's got stopping power. We've seen that at multiple different weight classes. Vegas basically agrees with me as well. Valentina is still a heavy favorite, around a 4-1 at the moment, but that's her closest odds since the Joanna fight. I still believe that Valentina will probably get her hand raised here, but I wouldn't be all that surprised if Jessica takes the belt. And I haven't felt that way about a Valentina fight in a long time. Next, a fight I've been looking forward to since Weili Zhang became champion back in 2019. We've got Rose Namajunas challenging for the strawweight title that was hers from November 2017 to May 2019. Rose, of course, lost that title to Jessica Andrade, who subsequently lost it to Weili Zhang. Rose comes back, avenges her loss to Jessica, and is now challenging for the belt again. Now, full disclosure, Rose is one of my favorite fighters. She's probably my favorite fighter that has not appeared on this podcast, actually. So I'll certainly be rooting for her on Saturday night, which isn't to say I'll be rooting against Weili, if that makes sense, because I like her too. There's been some weird sort of political comments about Rose fighting for freedom and fighting against the communism that Weili Zhang represents. I don't know about all that. For me, it's just a fight. I know Rose has to do stuff to sort of psych herself up and whatever, but I don't think Weili Zhang represents the entirety of the Chinese government, just like I don't think Rose represents the entirety of what the United States is. But whatever. Do what you got to do to psych yourself up. I understand the Lithuania bend to it. She obviously has a personal history with communism. Regardless, I'm not going to get into it. It's going to be a hell of a fight. But Rose rises to the challenge unlike anyone else in the division, and I think she refocuses and pulls this one off. I think her movement will be too fluid to be caught by Weili's power. She's a master at distance, so I think she'll avoid the takedown as well. Look for Rose to sort of pepper her with outside shots and slowly increase her volume as the rounds go and as Weili slows down. I'd be willing to take her as a plus 175 underdog here. I think Rose gets it done. And that brings us to the main event, Kamar Usman versus Jorge Masvidal. Now, an argument can be made that Usman is the single most dominant fighter we have right now. Virtually undefeated. I mean, he lost way back in 2013 in his second fight as a pro. He's won 17 in a row since then, including 13 fights in the UFC and 4 title fights. And he even beat Jorge Masvidal back in 2020. That was Masvidal's last fight, but not Usman's, who knocked out Gilbert Burns earlier this year. Now, I feel like I'm doing a bad job selling this fight, but also, that's not my job. I just don't see this playing out any differently than the last one. I think it's on the slower side, especially after watching the fights before it. I feel like we'll hear some boos as Usman sort of controls the pace with his grappling and doesn't allow the fan favorite Masvidal to execute any flashy strikes. People will call Usman a boring champ. Masvidal will complain about how Usman isn't a real fighter's fighter, and the world will keep spinning. That's how I see this one playing out. So to recap, I've got Valentina winning a close one, Rose pulling off the upset, and Usman retaining in fairly boring fashion. And just to spotlight a couple other fights that I'm looking forward to tomorrow, Weidman versus Uriah Hall should be a really fun one. Now, neither guy's at the height of their hype right now. You know, Uriah coming off Ultimate Fighter had all this hype around him. Weidman, of course, after defeating Anderson Silva, not once but twice, defending the belt a couple times, he had a ton of hype around him. So we're not quite there, but it's still a fun matchup. Alex Oliveira versus Randy Brown is a great fight as well. And I'm actually looking at Carl Robinson versus Brandon Allen to be a sneaky great fight on the prelims. But that'll do it for now. Thank you for listening. Rate, review, subscribe if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Subscribe on YouTube if you're listening there. Give us a thumbs up. And follow me on Twitter at Nick Risner, NickRizner. I'll be live tweeting the event. I'd be happy to interact with anyone over there. And that's it. Okay, thanks, guys. Enjoy the fights. Peace.